Hi, good morning, Facebook. Happy Wednesday. I'm Willis, Global Macro Director at Eurasia Group. I'm here with Michael Hirson, who knows a lot about China, who knows a lot about the ongoing U.S.-China trade and other forms of conflict, and who is the one who's dressed like a grown-up. Thank you for dressing up. We're going to jump right into it. This is obviously a very important moment in U.S.-Chinese relations, because we're about to have a G20 summit meeting in Buenos Aires, and we're still expecting that President Trump and President Xi are going to have some dedicated time to talk about what's going on in the U.S.-China trade conflict, and maybe there'll be some interesting headlines that come out of that. But, and by the way, we're very happy to take your questions in the comment section. If you just want to write in your questions, we'll try to pick them up as we go. We'll be on for just a few minutes this morning, but we're talking about the U.S.-China trade conflict, and I'm going to start with a very, very broad question. Obviously, the U.S. and China are involved in a trade conflict that involves tariffs on literally hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods. We've seen tit for tat go back and forth for months now. Who's winning?
It is a great question. I wish you hadn't asked me, because it's also impossible to answer in some ways. It depends on how many rounds we think this is going to go. I think that the shortest answer is, if we're talking about who's hurting the most right now, it's clearly China. China's economy is slowing. Now, much of that is actually because of moves that Xi Jinping...
It was already slowing.
It was
by
already
design.
slowing by design to control financial risks. But right now, the combination of that slowdown and the hit to confidence in China because of the trade war is having a big impact. And it's clearly registering with the leadership in Beijing. They're paying attention to issues like the state of the private sector in China, which they might have ignored previously. But because of all of these factors coming together to hit confidence, they're scrambling. So I think from that perspective, clearly China is hurting more. If we're looking at over the long term, China's goal is not necessarily to hit back at the U.S., but it's really to survive this onslaught. And it's to be able to survive the trade war without derailing China's strategy, including moving up the value chain and controlling more market share in all of these strategically important sectors of the future, like
sorry, this is a really important
Yeah.
point. What you're saying is that China is not trying to win by having a better offense than the U.S. has, or imposing more pain on the U.S. economy. They're trying to win by proving that they can survive a trade war without changing the policies that they've been pursuing the last few years to show them, look, we're not trading blows with you, but you can't get what you want by force from us. Is that correct?
That is a very good way of putting it. China wants to, you can think of China's strategy and objectives at this point as being more about resilience than retaliation. They're thinking about, they're seeing a very hard push from the U.S., and as you said, the G20 meeting is going to be key to how hard this push is going to be. Assuming that it continues at a very high pace, the strategy is how do we survive without being derailed in our core policies?
Now, I cut you off in the middle of, you were going into the technology part of the conflict. Now, I want to let you tell us more about that part of it, because we keep reading about soybeans and whatever the latest thing to be hit with a tariff is. But there's obviously a lot more to this conflict than just the things that have been targeted for tariffs. So tell us more about that.
No, that's right. I mean, technology is a huge part of this. The substance of the Section 301 investigation, and that is the authority that the United States is using to impose tariffs on China, is really focused on China, is focused on China's intellectual property policies, forcing U.S. companies, this is U.S. allegations, forcing U.S. companies to transfer their intellectual property as a condition of having market access in China.
And in some cases, stealing
Very
technology.
much as well. That's part of the U.S. charge against China. But even just setting aside the sort of substance of the report that the United States USTR has been issuing in these investigations, it's very clear that tech is really at the center of the geopolitical rivalry right now. And it's because when we're talking about areas like 5G wireless, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, These are technologies that both countries view as important, not just for the future of their economies, but a very strong link to national security. And so that's one reason why this trade push in the US, which is about tariffs, but also about other measures like investment restrictions, controlling US exports to China, this push has very strong backing from the US defense and intelligence establishment, from both parties. And so this is why this trade fight is also a technology fight and is much broader than just President Trump's policies. These are pressures in the relationship that have been building that are really coming out now and are not going to subside anytime soon.
Okay, so now let's take this to Buenos Aires now. You've got the G20 meeting coming up this weekend. The two leaders are going to sit down. And what I hear you saying is the Chinese feel more pain than the U.S. do economically at this moment, which must make President Trump feel pretty comfortable with where he is. But you're also saying that the Chinese are trying to prove that this is an endurance contest and that they can endure, therefore you have to negotiate with us. You can't win a fight just by piling pressure on us. That means that your expectation for anything positive and substantive to come out of this weekend's meeting has got to be pretty close to zero. If the Chinese are trying to play a long game and the U.S. has reason to think the U.S. might be winning, then is there any possibility at all that we're going to see anything substantive and good come out this weekend?
It's not zero, but I think it's low. I think it's low in terms of substance. That's really the key
When
point.
someone starts by saying it's not zero, it's pretty close
It's
to
low.
zero, right?
I think you framed it right by thinking about the substance. And what I mean here is President Trump, although we've said that China's hurting worse, you can tell President Trump is becoming more sensitive about the stock market in the U.S. and more concerned about the potential hit to the economy. You see that even in the way he's criticizing the Fed chair, Powell.
Right.
So he's clearly focused on this, and the tariffs are going to have an impact on the economy in the U.S., no question, and they're part of what's been hurting financial markets. So he's more inclined than maybe 2 months ago to think about what a deal with China